time until we have to actually make decisions. And the truth is we still have time before we have to make decisions. Clearly, our team performance has improved quite considerably over the past few weeks. I think we're playing much closer to the level of baseball and the consistency of baseball that we envisioned throughout the course of the season. And now we have to continue it. And I think everyone in that room understands that, that we've now given ourselves an opportunity and we need to continue to run with it.
Andy, Tony?
Okay. I know you've answered the question about the Hader trade before in various contexts, but as it relates to potentially the Mets trade deadline, did that introduce you to risks that you'll take into account this year about what might be a rational subtraction even in a potentially contending season? And would that give you pause more than you might have had before that Hader experience?
I think every situation is different, and certainly the types of decisions you're making in a situation in Milwaukee are probably a little bit different than the types of decisions you're making here. So I think we try to learn from everything we do, and I try to take stock of every decision I've made and grow from that. But I think you're faced with very different types of decisions and very different strategic choices in a market like Milwaukee than in a place like New York.
I guess so. A little bit more blunt follow-up. With this roster, do you see it as a possibility to subtract while still adding and contending? Is that a potential path that you could see happening?
I don't think I'd rule out anything at this point. We're still over a month away from the deadline, and so we still have some time to evaluate. And as we've just seen, a lot can transpire in a relatively short amount of time during the season.
Tony?
I had a similar question, just in regards of what you've seen over the last 3 weeks. I don't know if you just answered it, but has this group done enough in your eyes for you to say, okay, they deserve at the very least to stay together, or do you still need to see more over the next, say, 3 to 4 weeks?
Well, I think as we've seen over the last couple of weeks, we can continue to get information as we go along, and the world can change very quickly. In this case, we've played much better over the last couple of weeks, and that is very encouraging. And I think we're now playing at a level that more resembles what we thought the team could do throughout the course of the season.
Teams obviously, get hot, get cold over the course of a season. Why do you think it's been so drastic to each extreme for this group?
I don't know that I have a defined answer to that. I think health is part of that. I also think we've had some of our better players now get hot all together at the same time. And when you do that, it lengthens out a lineup. It allows you to score runs in bunches, and that's what we've been able to do.
Ryan?
In regards to that trade deadline, you said you have time, but do you have a time in mind when you don't have time anymore? Like, can you take it all the way up till 2 or 3 days before the deadline to make that decision, or do you have to know arbitrarily a week, 10 days out what you're going to do?
I mean, in theory, you could take it all the way up to the actual deadline if you wanted to. At some point, you have to make decisions, and decision points surface at different times in different years. Sometimes there are decision points in front of you about a potential transaction on July 15th, and sometimes the decision points really don't surface until much closer to the deadline or deadline day. So it's tough to predict when those will occur, but we'll certainly be prepared to make the best decisions we possibly can when we're faced with them.
If you're still playing as well as you are now, or as, like you said, closer to expectation than you were, can you envision a scenario where the Mets are buyers at the trade deadline?
Sure.
Howie?
David, even though the individuals who have helped get you to where you are kind of obvious with the way they've kicked things up, but apart from that, when the numbers involved, do you see perhaps one or two catalytic agents that transcend the numbers and the individual performances that have allowed you to sort of coalesce like this?
Well, I think looking at Alvy's impact on the team is something that we all see. We see it in how we've played when he's been active and frankly how we've played when he hasn't been active. And some of that is probably timing, and other guys playing well also, but some of that is just the importance of a catcher and how a catcher can impact the entire game. And when you have a catcher who impacts both sides of the ball, it can be very impactful.
Andrew?
Over here. How do you kind of view the state of the bullpen as currently constituted? Obviously, with the news that Drew's going to be down
Yeah.
for long term, lose Brooks fairly earlier this season.
We're going to need guys to step up, and this is not unique to us. Bullpens throughout baseball change over the course of the year. Relievers, unfortunately, get hurt over the course of the year. There's underperformance over the course of the year. And we're going to need some guys to step up, and we have. Reed Garrett has stepped up. Daniel Nunez has stepped up. I think Danny Young has done a very nice job stepping up. So we have had guys step up, take on some leverage innings, and I expect we'll continue to do so.
Keith?
Dave, when you were considering Luis Severino in the offseason, how close is this to best case scenario, and what gave you some ideas that you could have a bounce back here?
So I think so much with Sevy is health and his commitment to staying healthy, the work he did on his body throughout the offseason, and his determination to keep that up throughout the front end of the season, and that's what we've seen. So I think the importance when we acquired him was working with him to find the right routine, and that remains the priority now. And to his credit, he's done a tremendous job doing everything he can to keep his body strong.
Over there, on the left.
What have you seen from Senga and his progress of making it back, and do you have a timeline in your head that's ideal?
No firm timeline. We know that the goal now is get him on a mound next week in a rehab outing. Somewhere 2 to 3 innings probably is what we're looking at, and then we'll continue to map it out from there. But once we get into that rehab outing progression, we can be a little bit more specific as to what we think this looks like. We still may not know the exact number of outings it's gonna take, but I think what we saw yesterday here in a live BP session was really encouraging, and taking this next step and getting him on a mound in a minor league rehab game would be really good as well.
Bill again.
What has impressed you the most about Carlos Mendoza so far?
I think throughout Mendy's steadiness and consistency, and he understands this is a long season. He's been around this town a long time and has seen all the ups and downs that you can see, and so he's been the same guy from day one through when we've had our struggles to now when we've played much better. And from my perspective, that's very helpful. And I think that's certainly a real reason why we've been able to bounce back here throughout the course of the season.
Laura?
What kind of flexibility will you have to potentially add payroll at the deadline if you guys are buyers?
Look, I think Steve has shown repeatedly that he's committed to investing the resources in the team that we need to compete, and certainly I think he'll continue to do so.
Tony?
This group obviously has shown, some level of good chemistry in that room, especially as this winning streak is gone. What is just your general take on if the winning breeds that, or if it's the other way around?
I'm not smart enough to know that. I think it takes both, right? Like it's tough to have really good chemistry, really good vibes, really good energy all the time when you're not playing good baseball. I think it's also tough to sustain playing good baseball, given how much all of us are around each other, if you don't have the chemistry and the energy and the vibes. And so I think it does go hand in hand. I don't know what yields what, but it's fun when you have a group like that enjoys being around each other.
Jerry?
How important have the newcomers been, like Jose, Luis, and even JD, kind of get into a routine after a couple weeks? How important have those guys been in this long stretch you guys have had?
Yeah, I think it's been a real team effort over the past month or so, and we've had contributions from our entire roster. If we think about our wins over the past month, There have been games won by different aspects of our team, by pretty much every player on the roster. We've asked to fulfill big roles, and certainly some of the newer guys on our roster, the newer folks in the organization have been a part of that as well.
Andrew?
I'm just wondering, how do you kind of view the depth of the starting pitching? Obviously, with Kodai coming back,
Yeah.
We've heard that Christian Scott has a chance to work his way back into the rotation. What's that balance been like for you with so many kind of capable arms there?
That's a great problem to have. If we have more effective starting pitchers who are healthy at any given point than we have roster spots and rotation spots to the major league level, we're in a pretty good spot. So I think we're getting to that point. I think Kodai coming back will be a big boost.
Howie?
David, I'm sure that GMs or Pobos get unsolicited reactions from players from time to time about their manager, especially with a new manager. But have you gotten any particular, now that we're halfway through, ringing endorsements from an individual player or players that, really tell you that, not only do you think you have the right guy, but the players do as well?
I think our players' feedback has been uniform throughout Mendy's tenure, starting in spring training, that they appreciate his authenticity, his passion for the game, and his desire to win and compete. And I think we've seen that throughout, and I think it's reflected in how we're playing.
Ryan?
How would you evaluate Pete Alonso's season, and where do you think the slow start had anything to do with his uncertain future?
I think Pete has handled uncertainty, pressure, New York exceptionally well throughout his career, and I don't really think it's impacting him this year. I think Pete's had a good year. He's on pace for a bunch of home runs. He's hitting in the middle of our lineup. He gets pitched very carefully every single night. And I think he's doing what we would expect Pete Alonso to do.
Jerry, all right?
You have this turnaround like you had. You look at it as sort of a gradual thing. You see the one moment where David's home run to beat the Marlins a couple weeks ago. Something like that be the moment that sparks a team, or is it more gradual than that?
I think it's players playing well together at the same time. I think in retrospect, sometimes we can look back and find a moment that served as a catalyst or a spark. And maybe we'll look back at this thing and say it was JD's home run. Maybe it was winning the second game in London. I don't know. I think there was probably a cumulative effect of guys playing a little bit better and that just feeding on each other over the past month.
All right. Thank you very much, David. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.